Hi, my name is Doug Hagedorn. I will be speaking on the topic of connecting meaning in life, generativity, and legacy, and the role of Christian leaders in influencing followers. So I'll talk about leadership, but then I'll also talk about followership. I am part of a new C12 Christian business CEO peer-to-peer roundtable forum in Virginia Beach. And we have a relationship with Regent that I'm grateful for, and I've heard a lot of good things about. So I also lead a ministry called Leadership Foundation Builders as well. A little bit on my background, my leadership experience. I've spent 37 years with 4 Fortune 500 companies in the aerospace and defense realm, and been responsible for large organizations, lots of people, some virtual, some international, multiple business units. I've also had some leadership and uh, chairman of the board for a Christian school and started a couple businesses. So got a real passion around leadership, and I've also had educational experience. Just finished up my PhD in leadership studies from Dallas Baptist University. I've taught at Laterno University, Norfolk Bible College, and a couple other schools as well. I do executive coaching, career coaching, and life coaching. I've spoken at conferences, men's ministries, taught Sunday school, been on a number of radio shows, dozens, to promote my books that I've written. And I've also started recently a leadership podcast as well. So kind of my vision is servant leadership and followership. So I was very excited when I found out about this roundtable, because followers and leaders need to partner together to achieve a mission and purpose and benefit the organization, not just themselves or not just their boss. And so I hope to do that through my research and a strong faith and belief in Jesus Christ, and hope to impart some of that wisdom here today and provide an intersection of business, education, and faith. So before we jump into followership, some definitions of leadership dating back to the 50s. There's thousands of definitions. Behaviors of an individual directing the activities of a group towards shared goals. Warren Bennis, a leadership guru, talked about this concept eluding us or turning up in another form to taunt us with slipperiness and complexity. So we've invented terms and concepts and still haven't defined it. So that probably applies to today as well. Though we have plenty of definitions. Katz and Kahn talked about an influential increment over and above compliance or routine. So you'll see definitions of leadership involve behavior, concepts, inspiration, influence. Here's a few more. I like this, one of my favorites, James McGregor Burns. Leadership's one of the most observed and least understood phenomena on the earth. I also like this one. There's a reciprocal, collective, symbiotic relationship, mutual benefit, and a binding or bonding together between leader and follower. And then this process again, vision, value, environment. So here you'll talk about a phenomena, relationship, a process, and many other things. Here's a couple good textbook definitions if you like. Gary Yuckel and Peter Nordhaus, again, a process of influence, what, how, facilitating both individually and as a group to accomplish shared objectives. And then Nordhaus says, again, a process of influence to achieve a common goal. So I merged all that together to say, for me, I see leadership as both a process and activity and actions with an individual. They inspire, they influence, they motivate, they develop, and they serve biblical servant leadership, both their followers and peers, to achieve a common vision. So it can be vertical, but also horizontal. So that common vision, common goals, mutually beneficial results for this triad, as Ira Shaloff calls it, an organization, a leader, and a follower. I won't go through this just for sake of time today, but I did, over my 7.5 years of research and study and writing for my PhD dissertation, I did like to look at leader-centric versus follower-centric. These are my definitions, bucketing these in categories, so they're not always clean. But you can see the Google research, Google Scholar research shows that, a lot of the older leader-centric approaches, great man theory, scientific management, behavioral style, skills approaches, and strategic leadership are the most research topics. But you will see this bottom right-hand corner here that talks about what we're talking about in this roundtable: servant leadership, followership, authentic leadership, spiritual leadership. So just a little bit of perspective here, and over the last couple hundred years on leadership versus followership. And when we talk about leadership, one of my favorite of books I read was The Leadership Challenge. And this is based on several 100,000 CEOs and leaders being interviewed, followers being interviewed. And these are the most admired traits and characteristics in a leader. So you'll see a lot of these pop up when you look at the research in both leadership and followership: honesty, intelligence, dependability, a supportive, participative approach, cooperative, caring, loyal. So some of these may surprise you and some of them may not. Forward-looking, thinking strategically, that was higher than what I thought, greater than 60%. And some like courageous leadership, those things weren't as high, independent, etc. So here's a few paradigms that we need to break down. I love this roundtable when it came up, but how often have you heard people say, I'm going to take a follower class? It just doesn't happen. Or, hey, I think I'll register for a follower conference. We hear about leadership conferences. People fly all over the world for them. How about your latest book from a followership guru? There are plenty. They're starting to come around now. My favorite is The Art of Followership. I recently had Dr. What was his name? My favorite book is The Art of Followership. I recently had Dr. Ron Riggio on my podcast to talk about the many contributors to followership literature and research. Hey, in my corporate world, instead of having just a performance development or a career development plan discussion with my supervisor on leadership, let's talk about how effective I am as a follower. You just don't hear it. We talk about leadership development, not followership development. With our 3 to 5 year strategic plan, let's have follower development as a topic or key initiative. Again, just one of the things that you don't see. So we've got an opportunity here as up and coming leaders to shake some things up on this leader and followership paradigm. How about I want to be the best follower that I can be? Jesus didn't talk much about leadership. He said, come follow me. So followers have a great impact on the success of an organization. Some have said as much as 80%. A follower isn't just somebody who works for a leader. They can be a subordinate, but they can be a coworker, an outsider, peer. Leaders need to understand followers' needs, their attributes, their skills. Leaders are not just standalone leaders all the time. They're also followers, whether it's a chairman of the board or a board of directors or a customer, or as Christian leaders, we follow the Lord. So leaders are followers, but followers also are leaders. So we wear multiple hats. Food for thought. How does a follower determine leadership effectiveness? Talk about that a little bit, but here's some of the results in the research. Performance, competence, how well they communicate, how often they communicate. Do your actions as a leader align with your leadership values and beliefs, but also your follower values and beliefs? Do you trust and respect your followers? Do you sacrifice and care for your followers? Do you get to know them personally? Do you know about their families? Do you know how to pronounce their name? Little things that matter. Have you connected with them? Research on followership, just the last decade or two. The first formal theory of followership was 2014 with Rule BN, and there's been 716 articles with abstracts which include the word follower. Many different measures of followership starting, but still not a whole lot of research and results with followership. Two approaches. So one is a relational, you're constructing things together between leader and follower. The other is co-production. You're executing a strategy, you're executing a plan as a follower and just following the leader's guidance. Peter Senge talked about leadership development and the art of learning and said there's nothing more powerful than shared vision. You get buy-in from followers by developing a strategy, mission, vision with them so they have their fingerprints on it. Leaders need followers. Followers need leaders, says James McGregor Burns. Organizations consist of that triad of leader, follower, and purpose. Barbara Kellerman talks about leader, follower, and context. I like that triad as well. Follower doesn't just equal a subordinate. Gardner and Laskin talked about heart and mind, capturing the heart and mind of a follower to lead them to change, not just mandating. And that takes time to go do in indirect leadership. Need to affect their thoughts, their feelings, to affect their behaviors. And good leaders empower. They delegate, they raise up, they take risks. So here's some issues with that current paradigm we talked about. Leaders don't say exactly what they mean. So we need authentic leaders. Leaders are not willing to admit their mistakes. Again, there's some boundaries that need to be drawn there. It's a big one. Talking about shared vision, the follower does not feel like an owner. They feel like someone saluting most of the time. So here's a few followership definitions. Kellerman takes kind of a cynical look here. Subordinates have less power, less authority, less influence than do their superiors, and who therefore usually, but not invariably, fall into line. Robert Kelly, one of the first to write on the topic, people who know what to do without being told. So he accentuates some of the positive. They act with intelligence, independence, courage, and ethics. And then Joseph Ross says followership is the process people use to follow. Followership is what followers follow. Just a few characteristics. We talked about characteristics of a leader. So what are their traits? How confident and optimistic? What are their skills and expertise? Their commitment to tasks, their job satisfaction, their cooperation, etc. Here's a few guidelines. As a follower, show appreciation to your leader, provide recognition, not as a kiss up necessarily, because that happens and people can read through that, but be willing to challenge flawed plans and proposals, be courageous, resist inappropriate influence by the boss, and then provide upward coaching and counseling and managing self. Here's a few musings when we talk about that paradigm or mindset shift. Jesus didn't say, come take my leadership development course. He said, come follow me. When we interview candidates, do we check the resume for followership traits, followership experiences, having those discussions? Are they good followers? A constant question to ask, does a follower serve the leader or does a leader serve the follower? Yes. When you raise your children for 18 years, are you raising them to be leaders? Most people will quickly answer yes, but if you think about it, we taught them to be followers. Stand straight in line, eat your meal, finish your food, do your exercise, comb your hair. So, and then all of a sudden, we expect them to shift into leaders. So, just a few thoughts. I created this template. If you'd like a copy, contact me, a clean version of this. I looked at the research by Larry Spears, Robert Greenleaf, Henry and Richard Blackaby Burns, and others on some of the traits of servant leaders. And I created this acrostic along with some scriptural connections there. We don't have time to cover that today. I do want to talk about my research with followership, 453 pages worth, 454 articles, 182 books, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to talk about the topics of meaning in life, generativity, and legacy, and how they combine together with leaders and followers. So meaning in life is such a broad topic, but I honed in over here with Viktor Frankl, Erik Erikson, and then some of the later researchers on this topic of meaning in life. And this word generativity came up. And so that we have a lot of sources of meaning in our lives. We also have benefits from having meaning. We're healthier if we have meaning. We're more satisfied with our jobs if we have meaning. There's more hope and optimism. And we get that from our walk with the Lord, our relationships, our family, etc. So as a leader, you can provide these sources of meaning. You can also provide these benefits to followers. So topic of my study was looking at faith-based educational institutions to look at this topic of generativity and legacy. So we'll talk about that in a connection with achieving meaning in life. The problem was that generativity in the workplace and in leadership had not been researched. Daniel McAdams, one of the leaders, said that adults, as they get older, may struggle to solve the problem of generativity. They want to leave a positive legacy for the next generation, but what can they do? So there's not a lot of leadership studies related to faith-based schools, and educational leaders are positioned here at Regent and other schools to have a great influence on students, not just legacy, but this topic of generativity. So the goal was to close the gaps in the research and to cover some additional insights. First question was, how are educational leaders involved in generative actions, such as leaving a legacy or investing in others to pass on ideas, behaviors, values, and things? I worked within the university model school setting. It's a K through 12, 3-day a week in school and 2 days at home model. So it is unique. Question number 2, what expressions or creations of an educational leader's meaning in life were connected to their roles in the school? 3 was what role does this focus on generativity and legacy play in achieving meaning? And then lastly, how are leaders intentional about investing in future generations? I'm not going to go through this. It was a multiple case study. Lots of scholarly research, as you can imagine. I would highly recommend reading the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Lots of other researchers. I did a podcast with John Cottray, one of the early researchers, and Paul Wong is a pastor and has done a lot of positive psychology research on meaning in life. Erik Erikson talks about this topic of generativity. Doesn't necessarily talk about how it's linked, but he wrote about generativity in a whopping 2 pages in his book, Childhood and Society. So you've heard this life cycle development, even the 7 stages of men. There are many different stages. Shakespeare talks about that and many other different stages of life cycle development. I'm going to focus on this 7 here. Generativity is what we're going to talk about. What is it? It's a selfless caring. It's a guiding the next generation. So as a leader, think about these things. How can you be more generative? Guiding, caring, investing in others, giving a gift to the future, teaching, nurturing, providing a benefit to the community, leaving a lasting impression, and then creating a lasting legacy. So this concern for and commitment to promoting future generations, developing individuals, keeping the meaning. What survives you, Erickson talked about. So this topic of legacy, we're not going to drill down into that much today, but some great contributions. Daniel McAdams did the most research on this topic of generativity. The data collection, I used 3 schools, and I had an alumni focus group. The 3 schools varied by the length they'd been in existence, geographical location, enrollment, and the type of schools they were. Theme number 1 in my findings: educational leaders experienced personal meaning in life and participated in many meaning-making activities within their leadership roles. So look at these 5 areas and how they impact followers. Your faith and your relationship with God directly impacts followers. You're teaching and investing and pouring into them. Whether you're an educator or not, you're teaching. You're a mentor, you're a model as a leader. As a family and as a parent, you're bringing meaning into the lives of your children and yourself. Your role as a leader, your relationship with the student or the coworker or the employee. And then this whole concept of discipleship and ministry, whether you're in a church or a school or a corporate setting, we have that opportunity as believers. So this brings personal meaning in life, these 5 areas. And there are more, but my findings were within this educational context. The second, educational leaders cited many ways they felt they were living and leaving a legacy. Legacy is something that goes beyond yourself. It outlives yourself. It's passing on, transmitting knowledge, beliefs, and values. It flows. This was very interesting. Legacy flows out of one's calling and purpose, I discovered. I asked no questions about calling during my research, qualitative interviews, and yet educational leaders and leaders in general bring up this topic of calling and their purpose in life. They weren't always intentional or purposeful on leaving a legacy, but they did cite many ways they felt they were leaving a legacy. Theme 3, especially in a faith-based environment, discipleship and a faith-based worldview are part of one's calling and purpose, trying to pass that on. And then theme 4, this topic of generativity. What are you generating to impact and influence your followers? You're doing it through teaching, through discipling, through mentoring, whether it's one-on-one or teaching or training, through nurturing, caring, love. Erickson calls it concern, a virtue of care, parenting, relationships. So lastly, a summary of my findings. Here again are some of the generative expressions that I discovered between leader and follower: administrating, caring, involved with the community, coaching, counseling. I think we've talked about all of these others. Servant leadership. How can you serve? I did that whole study on that acrostic, which you could take a look at. Those are generative expressions. Number 2, this topic of meaning in life. Meaning was created and expressed through one's faith. It was related to one's calling and purpose, and it was discovered through roles, relationships, and generative expressions in life. And we talked about where meaning, personal meaning, is found. It's found in many areas, but within a faith-based setting, as a believer, these were 9 of the key areas. And lastly, what role does the leader's focus on generativity have in achieving meaning in life? There is a connection there that wasn't the whole context of the study, but there was definitely a connection, and generativity also brought personal meaning. We will talk about very quickly, I'm not going to go through this, but if you're wondering how we define legacy, this is 20 definitions from the participants. Erickson talked about it, stage 7, generative expressions. These were the 4 domains that I found within this study: relational, educational, spiritual, and within the family. Future research, if this inspires you or you want to know more, this was again a university model school, so it could be expanded outside of that realm. Digging deeper into this connection between calling and purpose, I think would be great, using a mixed method approach, doing some quantitative surveys and some of the generative and meaning in life, purpose in life checklist. And there's some calling instruments that would be very helpful as well. And then maybe touching on Erickson's life cycle to look at some of the age-related variables. One typically wants to leave a legacy and focus on generativity more as they age. So maybe they're looking at their second half and having an influence beyond their generation. So lastly, conclusions. Leaders have the opportunity to function in generative ways with their followers and to leave a legacy with their followers. Leaders express that generativity, and it resulted in personal reward, meaning, personal meaning, going home at the end of the day and ending their lives with a well done, good and faithful servant. There's a reward there. Most teachers weren't doing it to get the reward, because most teachers don't get acknowledged or thanked. It will be in the afterlife where God says, well done. There were relationships between meaning, generativity, and legacy. And this great surprise, which was so exciting, is that there is a relationship between one's calling and purpose and meaning in life, and generativity and legacy. So this is how to get a hold of me if you have any more questions. If you'd like to see the research, I'd love to share more about it. If you like some of the graphics. People over the age of 65 were interviewed, and they said, if you had to live your life over again, what would you do different? And it was unanimous. They said, I would invest my time and my money in things that went beyond my generation. That's what generativity is about. That's what leadership and followership is about: investing, serving our followers. So hopefully that was helpful to you. Thank you.